Well, let's look at this in a little bit more detail. Joining us now is Sam Lewis, a freelance journalist and political commentator with Young Voices UK. Watching that, Sam, did you think the Prime Minister was OK?
Well, I think that the Prime Minister over the years has always had quite an odd ability to bring up quite very specific and random examples, and usually it endears him to the ordinary person. I mean, remember when he announced the Australian trade deal, he brought up Tim Tams and boomerangs. Before the Brexit referendum, he talked about exporting cake to France. So I think he is okay. It's just part of his style. The problem with the speech was that he stumbled for 30 seconds and lost his way. So that potentially shows why it's caught on. I think that has more to do with, a bit of lack of organisation, but also the fact that he had a cold. But the fact that he also went on in the speech about quoting Lenin, he attempted to replicate the sound of an accelerating car and compared himself to Moses after returning from Mount Sinai. I mean, I know in China, for example, Xi Jinping thought recently came out, which went to 6 volumes. So I wonder how long Boris Johnson thought might be if he ever turns to totalitarian dictatorship. Not that he ever would. But the fact he brought up Peppa Pig as well is not that much of a surprise. I mean, it is a big export industry. It's worth $6 billion. I remember when I lived in China personally, you could see Peppa Pig on each metro station. So it's not unexpected of Boris Johnson to bring up this very random example, but I think add on to all the chaos that's happened in the last few weeks, it's not given him a good look. It's certainly not the headlines he wanted to wake up to this morning.
Sam. It's worse than that. This is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom looking, sounding shambolic. It's not a good look. It's a real concern.
I think that this is the CBI address, the annual address given by the Prime Minister every year. It's certainly not a good look at all. I don't believe it's shambolic. This is something that over the years he's built this, he's cultivated this personality where people, he plays the fool. And that's, of course, not a good thing for the Prime Minister in general, for the office of the Prime Minister, but it's part of Boris Johnson's charm, I think, with the ordinary voter. Most people won't care about this.
I mean, front page of lots of the papers is this sort of stinging criticism of him. One Conservative MP is quoted in the Times saying the Prime Minister desperately needs a big moment where everyone says, boom, he's back. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I'm not sure when it will come, but I fear that in the next few weeks we're going to see a few problems coming up with the rise of inflation and the potential continued U-turn on some parliamentary standards as happened in the last few weeks. Add this to the chaotic announcement of the change to HS2 and the rising number of migrants across the Channel. This is a bit of a concern. I'm sure Labour will be licking their lips, waiting to pounce on every opportunity that they have. But we'll simply have to see what happens in the next few weeks. And I'm not sure if there is an announcement that is coming up that he can use, but he certainly needs something.
Yeah, I've just had an email from Barry who said, I'm not worried about Boris Johnson. I'm worried about him running the country. And I suspect that's a feeling shared by many. Of course, last night the social care bill went through, not the majority perhaps he would have wished. But again, that's raised questions about his intent over levelling up the country, because this clearly is going to have an impact on poorer people.
Certainly, and I think that this has been ill thought through. I mean, the only reason it passed was that it is an improvement on the previous system where there was nothing in place. The fact that there is a cap now of £86,000 is a better thing than what was previously, when your bills, regardless of your wealth, could go into the hundreds of thousands or more. But this is something that, especially in the north, they are concerned about, because a house worth £120,000, for example, if that's your house and you pay £86,000, you're only left with £34,000. But if you live in the south and you have a house worth £500,000, you're left with 80% of your wealth still. So this is something that will not play well in the red wall areas of the country, and he's certainly got to turn it around if he wants to. This is, again, breaking a manifesto promise as well, that you might not have to sell your house for care, but tens of thousands of people will have to. And northern constituency MPs of the Tory party are not happy about it.
Sam, let's move on, if we can, to the pandemic. We've seen lots of different countries across Europe putting in sort of more draconian measures on their population. And there's a poll in the UK that says actually almost half of us would back introducing a national lockdown for those who haven't had both of their jabs. Does that surprise you? And can you see that we would ever implement something like that here?
I don't think it does. It's 2 years into the lockdown, or it's 2 years into the pandemic, and people are tired that this is still going on in some way. And I think people forget that, for example, the Spanish flu went on for 10 years. We seem to think that it only went on for 2 years and it suddenly finished. It didn't. It continued within the population. So it's not surprising that people want to be a little bit draconian, and certainly it shows why there's a bit of a backlash across Europe, because people really. Some people are taking sides now. Some people really don't want to be in lockdown. Some people seem to be happy to say that you should wear masks. But across Europe, what we're seeing is something which is quite surprising, because the EU has sort of prided itself on having actually overtaken the UK now in its vaccination rates. But the fact that it's had to go back into lockdown in parts is a worry. Certainly for us here. I don't think we will, because for so long we've had quite a high rate of we've for the last few months been the highest in Europe at the number of people who are suffering from coronavirus, and as a result, we're not getting the same spike that we are now. I was recently in Malta, where I was, for example, I went into an elevator, and the Germans, I met a few Germans in there who were very serious that I wear a mask. While if you looked at the British tourists who were there, they were more lackadaisical about it. So it shows that there are different cultural attitudes here and on the continent.
Now let's talk about the migrant crisis. Nigel Farage considering a return to politics, apparently. He's so concerned about this. But Priti Patel suggesting now that the link between the UK and France is going to have to be a lot stronger, and that a joint approach is needed.
Well, yes, the current relations between France and the UK are probably the lowest they've been in my lifetime, perhaps a bit longer. The fact is that across a wide range of things, mostly due to Brexit, we've not been getting along very well, and we will have to build a stronger relationship. I mean, we shouldn't forget that across a broad range of other issues, we still are very much aligned. Defence policy, for example, the parachute regiment were recently in the south of France conducting joint exercises, which were very successful. I think those are the sorts of stories we need to hear more about, because it will lead to a better relationship elsewhere. But the fact is that now that 25,000 people this year have crossed the channel, it shows that something the French aren't doing as much as potentially they should. They don't want British police on their soil either, sort of helping to prevent migrants coming across, because that would be against their sovereignty, they feel. But the Home Office is trying, and Priti Patel especially, is trying to show that this isn't actually to do with the French-British relationship. This is a global migration crisis. If you look at the US border, if you look at what's happening in Poland, and she says that the Nationality and Borders Bill, which will be introduced, currently actually going through Parliament, would introduce a long-term solution to the problem. But it's not necessarily bringing people in the UK on board at the moment. The Sunday Telegraph found that 70% of Tory voters thought that the government's approach was too soft, while in the public more generally, it's about 55% who are unhappy with the way the government has dealt with this.
Sam, it's great to see you. Thank you very much for your guide through that this morning, Sam Lewis.